Today, we're diving into the final, violent chapter of a story that absolutely shocked the music world. It's a story that ends not on a stage with cheering crowds, but inside a high-security prison cell.
So, let's just get right to it. The headline says it all, really. Ian Watkins, the former frontman of the band Lostprophets, is dead at 48. His life ended inside the very prison where he was supposed to be serving a 35-year sentence for some of the most horrific child sex offenses imaginable. And it didn't take long for the official word to come out. West Yorkshire Police released a statement, very formal, very to the point. They were called about an assault, and a man was pronounced dead right there at the scene. They didn't name him at first, but it didn't take long for prison sources to confirm who it was.
Okay, so you've got this guy serving what's basically a life sentence. How does he end up murdered? Well, the first reports to come out paint a really brutal picture of his last moments.
And from what sources are saying, this wasn't random. It sounds like it was a brutal, premeditated attack. The story goes that just after the cells were unlocked for the day, another prisoner ambushed Watkins using a makeshift blade, a shank, to slash his throat. He apparently died from massive blood loss before anyone could save him.
But look, to really get why this is such a huge story, you have to rewind the clock a bit. You have to remember the person the public thought he was. You have to remember, before all of this, Ian Watkins was a massive rock star. His band, Lostprophets, was a huge deal. They formed back in Wales, sold millions and millions of albums. They even had a #1 record in the UK. They broke into the American charts too. We're talking about a band that played to massive arena crowds.
And that's really the chilling part of this whole thing, right? This massive gap between who everyone thought he was and the monster he actually was. On the outside, he was this famous, charismatic rock star. But in reality, he was a serial child predator, and his horrific crimes would eventually land him a 35-year prison sentence, completely destroying that public image forever. So just how bad was it? What did he do to go from rock god to this? The list of his crimes reveals a kind of depravity that's, it's just hard to wrap your head around.
You can see it right here. The timeline is it's a nosedive. For more than a decade, he's living this awful double life. Then boom, 2012, it all comes crashing down when he's arrested. A year later, he pleads guilty to everything, and his attempt to get a shorter sentence is shot down. The court gave him a sentence of 29 years behind bars, plus another 6 years on license. That's a grand total of 35 years. It was a sentence meant to make sure he'd probably never walk free again. That's how dangerous the judge thought he was.
And when you look at the charges he actually pleaded guilty to, honestly, it's hard to even read. We're talking about the attempted rape of a baby, conspiring with other people to abuse children, and having a massive collection of indecent images. He was preying on the children of his own fans.
Even the judge, Mr. Justice Royce, was just floored by it. He said the case plunged into new depths of depravity, basically saying was one of the worst he'd ever seen. He acknowledged the shock and disgust that any decent person would feel hearing the details.
Okay, so he gets this huge sentence. Where do they send a guy like that? Well, they sent him to one of the most infamous prisons in the UK. And to really get why he was killed, you have to understand the brutal world he was living in.
It's called HMP Wakefield, but pretty much everyone knows it by its nickname, Monster Mansion. And yeah, it's got that name for a reason. It's a maximum security prison that holds some of the most dangerous, high-profile criminals in the entire British prison system.
Think about the kind of people he was locked up with. You've got Harold Shipman, the serial killer, Charles Bronson, a guy literally famous for being the most violent prisoner in Britain, and Robert Mausley, a killer so dangerous they keep him in a special glass cell. This was not a safe place to be.
And here's where it gets really crazy. There were warning signs. Official warning signs. A report from the Chief Inspector of Prisons came out just weeks before he died, highlighting that violence at Wakefield had increased markedly, and it specifically pointed out that older men convicted of sexual offenses felt unsafe. It's like they were predicting this could happen.
So yeah, he was a target. And we know this for a fact because it had happened before. Just over a year before his death, he was taken hostage and severely beaten by 3 other prisoners for hours. He was a marked man long before that final attack.
So that all brings us right back to the beginning, doesn't it? Back to this final, fatal attack and the official investigation that's now kicking off.
So what's happening now? Well, police have moved fast. 2 other inmates have already been arrested on suspicion of his murder. The big question for investigators now is, how could this possibly happen inside a maximum security prison that was already on high alert?
Look, it's easy to get caught up in the drama of his death, but at the end of the day, we have to remember what this story is really about. As child protection groups like the NSPCC said, Watkins used his fame like a weapon. But this story was never really about a celebrity. It has always been about his victims.
So, this dark chapter is finally over. But it leaves you wondering, right? Whether you see this as some kind of brutal prison yard justice or a complete failure of the system, it leaves all of us with a really tough question. What does justice even mean when it's served not by a judge, but by another inmate with a blade?